Welcome to Forgotten History Daily. I am William, and tonight we journey into one of history's most fascinating and darkest stories. A tale that will transport you to the vibrant streets of 1920s Oklahoma, where a thriving black community, once considered America's wealthiest, would be reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. It was June 1st, 1921, when the city of Tulsa became witness to one of the most heinous acts of racial violence in American history. The massacre, later dubbed the Tulsa Riot by historians, would result in the deaths of an estimated 300 black residents, with many more injured or displaced. But what makes this event even more disturbing is that it was not a spontaneous outbreak, but rather a carefully orchestrated attack, sanctioned by some of the city's most prominent white leaders. On that fateful day, a young black man named Dick Rowland, who had recently moved to Tulsa from Arkansas, was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator at a local department store. The incident sparked outrage among the city's white population, with many calling for lynching. As tensions escalated, a group of armed white vigilantes, many of whom were connected to the Ku Klux Klan, began to mobilize, led by men like J.B.A. Robertson and William Fulkerson, who would later become infamous for their roles in the atrocity. These vigilantes descended upon the predominantly black Greenwood district, a once thriving commercial hub that had been dubbed Black. Cravens and the Jones family was systematically ravaged, burning homes, businesses, and churches to the ground. The marauding mob left a trail of destruction in its wake, forcing residents to flee for their lives. The very fabric of this vibrant community was torn apart in a matter of hours, leaving behind only smoldering ruins and unspeakable trauma.
As we delve into the forgotten history of Tulsa's 1921 massacre, we'll uncover the shocking truth about how a city once celebrated its diversity, now attempted to erase it from memory.
Tonight, on Forgotten History Daily, we explore one of America's darkest chapters, where innocence was lost and hope was brutally extinguished in just one night. As the flames engulfed the Greenwood district, the sounds of terror echoed through the streets. Women and children screamed as they fled their burning homes, while men fought to defend their families and properties against the marauding mob. The violence was indiscriminate, with no regard for age or innocence. A young girl named Viola Fletcher, who would later become a prominent witness in the aftermath of the massacre, remembered hearing the sound of gunfire and screams coming from her family's home. "My father tried to defend our house," she said in an interview years later. "He was shot in the leg and fell on me, trying to shield me from the bullets. The chaos was so intense that it seemed as though the city itself was being torn apart." The Greenwood district, once a beacon of hope and prosperity for African Americans, was now reduced to ashes and rubble. As the night wore on, the violence showed no signs of abating. Instead, it only intensified, with more and more white vigilantes joining in on the destruction. Some of these men were members of the Ku Klux Klan, while others were simply ordinary citizens who had been whipped into a frenzy by racist propaganda. The city's legion, including Mayor Harry F. Bartlett and Police Chief John A. Gustafson, seemed either unwilling or unable to intervene. In fact, some reports suggest that they even actively participated in the violence, or turned a blind eye to it. One eyewitness account from the time describes how police officers were seen laughing and joking as they watched the destruction unfold. "It was like a picnic for them," said us. "They'd drive up to the houses, shoot out the windows, and then leave." The massacre continued well into the early hours of the morning, with some estimates suggesting that it lasted for over 12 hours. By dawn, the Greenwood district lay in ruins, with entire blocks reduced to smoldering rubble. As the sun rose on June 1st, 1921, the city's residents began to survey the devastation. The once thriving commercial hub was now a desolate wasteland, with homes and businesses destroyed beyond recognition. The trauma of the event would linger for years to come, leaving deep scars that would never fully heal. In the aftermath of the massacre, the city attempted to cover up its role in the violence. The media was quick to blame the destruction on rooters and looters, with a little mention of the systemic racism and white supremacist ideology that had fueled the attack. But for those who lived through it, there could be no denying the truth. The massacre was a stark reminder of the brutal treatment meted out to African Americans during this period in American history. As we continue our exploration of this forgotten chapter in history, we'll examine the aftermath of the event and how it has been remembered or erased over time. As Viola Fletcher, now an elderly woman, reflected on her experiences that fateful night, she spoke with a sense of sadness and regret. "We were destroyed," she said. "Our homes, our businesses, everything we had built was taken away from us in just one night." The forgotten massacre of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a sobering reminder of the darkest aspects of American history and the ongoing. In the scorching summer of 1921, a city on the prairie was ablaze with promise. Tulsa, Oklahoma, was a boomtown in every sense. Its economy booming, its population swelling, and its black community thriving. The Greenwood district, as it was known, was the epitome of African American success, a vibrant hub of culture, commerce, and resilience. Imagine strolling down Greenwood Avenue surrounded by elegant shops, restaurants, and nightclubs. You're in 1921, but you might as well be in Harlem or Chicago. The atmosphere is electric, the air thick with music and laughter. This was the Black Wall Street of America, where black entrepreneurs built their own economy, free from the shackles of segregation. June 1st, 1921, marks a pivotal day in this narrative. The community was at peace, enjoying the sunshine and warm evenings that characterized that particular week. But on that fateful night, a spark would ignite a powder keg of hatred and violence. Meet Richard Rowland, the owner of the nearby oil wells. He was a local business magnate with a reputation for being, some called him a racist. Others saw him as a man ahead of his time. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. He harbored deep-seated resentment towards the growing prosperity of the Greenwood district. For years, Rowland had been trying to buy out African American landowners along the major thoroughfares of Tulsa. He wanted control of the lucrative businesses that catered to the city's black population. The black community, however, refused to sell. They saw this as an attempt to strangle their economic progress. Now, you might wonder, what could possibly happen in a single night to shake this delicate balance? On June 1st, a group of African American men strolled into the Drexel building, located on one of Rowland's properties. They were looking for a white man who had allegedly molested a young black girl earlier that evening. These men, members of the local community, not some ragtag vigilantes, wanted justice. But little did they know, their actions would set off a chain reaction that would destroy an entire city block.
Tulsa's police chief, John A.
Gustafson, was no friend to the African American community. In fact, he had a history of clashing with local leaders over issues of police brutality and racial equality. That night, as reports began flooding in about the scuffle at the Drexel building, Gustafson was quick to label it an armed insurrection. The city's African American newspaper, the Tulsa Star, would later describe the events that unfolded. Their intentions were clear: to wreak havoc and destruction upon this thriving community. As the night wore on, fire after fire consumed the city block. The once thriving business district was now ablaze with terror and chaos. Homeowners fled for their lives as buildings burned down around them. Some 60 homes, churches, and businesses were reduced to smoldering ruins within a matter of hours. On June 1st, 1921, in the span of just one night, Tulsa's Greenwood district was transformed into an apocalyptic wasteland. Entire families lost their homes, businesses were destroyed, and lives were forever altered. Imagine standing amidst the chaos, surrounded by flames that seemed to lick at the very air itself. The stench of burning wood, glass, and human despair hangs heavy in your nostrils. Now, let's revisit a pivotal figure, Willard S. Hawkins, the mayor of Tulsa during this fateful period. A Harvard-educated lawyer, Hawkins would later claim that he had done everything in his power to protect the African American community from violence. Yet, evidence suggests otherwise, that on that night, Mayor Hawkins chose not to deploy sufficient police or National Guardsmen to quell the rioters. Perhaps he was too entrenched in the city's white elite. Maybe he underestimated the ferocity of these racist mobs. June 2nd, 1921, dawned over a desolate landscape. The once thriving Greenwood district lay smouldering, its dreams and aspirations incinerated along with the very buildings that housed them. In the aftermath of this atrocity, estimates suggest between 30 to 300 people lost their lives. Properties valued in excess of $1 million have been destroyed, a staggering sum for that era. The city's African leaders were left stunned, bewildered, and heartbroken. As one local historian later wrote, the riot was more than just an attack on property. It was a visceral assault on the very soul of our community. We now know this event as the Tulsa Massacre, but in its time, it went live because America's wealthy and influential elites wanted to downplay the severity of the violence. You see, history can be both cruel and convenient, especially when it suits those in power to conceal their complicity in atrocities like this one.
Now, let's consider the long-term effects on Tulsa's African American community.
The wounds inflicted that night would take decades to heal. Many families never recovered from the loss of homes and livelihoods. Some were forced to abandon their beloved Greenwood district altogether. As we explore this tragedy in greater depth, confronted with a harsh reality, America's history is as complex and multifaceted as its people. Sometimes, it's easier to sweep uncomfortable truths under the rug. But tonight, we've decided to shine a light into that dark corner. So, what can be gleaned from this harrowing story? Perhaps most poignantly, that even in the 20th century, America's black communities continue to face systemic violence and marginalization. The consequences of that trauma are still being felt today.
The forgotten history of Tulsa's Greenwood district serves as a stark reminder. We can't separate the ghosts of our past from our current understanding of racial disparities in this country.
As we delve deeper into the aftermath of the Tulsa Massacre, it becomes clear that the city's African American community was left reeling. The destruction of Greenwood District was not just a physical blow, but also a psychological one. Many residents were forced to flee their homes, leaving behind everything they had worked for. The trauma of that night would stay with them for generations to come. The city's response to the massacre was telling. Instead of offering aid and support to the victims, officials instead tried to downplay the severity of the violence. They claimed it was a riot caused by African Americans themselves, and that the destruction was merely a result of looting and vandalism. This narrative was perpetuated in local newspapers, and even by some prominent business leaders. But those who lived through the massacre knew the truth. They remembered the sounds of gunfire and screams, the smell of smoke and burning buildings. They recalled the sense of terror and helplessness as they watched their community being destroyed. They knew that the city's officials were not telling them the whole story. In fact, it was only years later, through the efforts of local historians and journalists, that the true extent of the massacre began to come to light. In 1999, a commission established by the state of Oklahoma found that up to 300 people had lost their lives in the violence, making it one of the deadliest incidents of racial violence in American history. But even as the truth about the massacre finally came to light, many questions remained unanswered. What role did local law enforcement play in the violence? Did they stand by and do nothing, or were they actively involved in the destruction of Greenwood District? And what was the full extent of the city's response to the disaster? One person who helped shed some light on these questions was a former Tulsa police officer named Bill Levy. Levy had served on the force during the 1920s and had spoken out about the massacre for decades, claiming that his own colleagues had been involved in the violence. "I saw things that I will never be able to forget," Levy told a reporter in 2001. "The way people were treated, it was just terrible. It's something that should have never happened." Levy's testimony helped fuel renewed efforts to come to terms with the Tulsa Massacre and its legacy. In 2019, the city officially acknowledged its role in the violence, apologizing for its failure to protect African American residents during the riot. The apology came too late for many of those who had suffered during the massacre, but it was a significant step towards healing and reconciliation. It also highlighted the need for continued efforts to uncover the truth about America's history, no matter how painful or uncomfortable it may be.
As we continue our exploration of this tragic event, let us remember that the story of Tulsa's Greenwood district is not just a reminder of past violence, but also a testament to the resilience and determination of African American communities in the face of it.
In the years following the massacre, the city of Tulsa embarked on a deliberate campaign to erase all evidence of the violence from public memory. The buildings that had once stood proud in Greenwood district were demolished, and the streets were renamed. The city's leaders claimed that they wanted to move forward and forget the horrors of the past. But many historians believe that this effort was motivated by a desire to avoid confronting the truth about the role of law enforcement in the massacre. One of those who was instrumental in covering up the events of that fateful night was a man named John A. Gustafson, the then chief of police in Tulsa. Gustafson had been on duty during the massacre and was known to have taken a firm stance against the African American residents of Greenwood district. He denied any involvement in the violence, but documents later uncovered suggested that he had given orders to his officers to stand down and allow the rioters to continue their rampage. Gustafson's actions were not an isolated incident. The Tulsa Police Department as a whole seemed to have been involved in covering up the massacre, with many of its officers turning a blind eye to the violence or actively participating in it. This culture of complicity was reflected in the city's official reports and investigations, which downplayed the severity of the events and absolved law enforcement of any responsibility. It wasn't until 1979 that the Tulsa Tribune, a local newspaper, began to investigate the massacre, published a series of articles that revealed new evidence about the role of law enforcement. The paper's investigative team discovered that Gustafson had ordered his officers to protect property and lives, which many interpreted as a tacit approval of the violence. The revelation sparked renewed interest in the massacre and led to further investigations by historians, journalists, and community activists. However, it wasn't until 2019, nearly 9 decades after the event, that the city officially acknowledged its role in the tragedy.
On April 12th, Tulsa Mayor G.T.
Bynum issued a formal apology, stating that the actions of the city of Tulsa were inexcusable and we are truly sorry. The apology was met with both praise and criticism from community leaders. Some welcomed it as a long overdue acknowledgement of the city's role in the massacre, while others saw it as too little, too late. The apology also sparked a heated debate about reparations and compensation for survivors and their families. As we reflect on this painful chapter in American history, it becomes clear that the true cost of the massacre extends far beyond the lives lost that night. The trauma inflicted upon African American communities was not confined to 1921. Its echoes continue to resonate through generations. It serves as a stark reminder of the systemic racism and inequality that persists to this day. The story of Tulsa's Greenwood district is one of resilience, determination, and unrelenting spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship. The community that rose from those ashes not only rebuilt itself, but also became a beacon of hope for other African American communities across the country. Their determination to thrive despite adversity serves as a testament to the power of human will. In our exploration of this tragic event, we must not forget the voices of those who have been silenced or marginalized by history. We must listen to their stories and learn from their experiences. Only then can we begin to heal the wounds of the past and create a more just and equitable society for all Americans. Welcome to Forgotten History Daily, where we delve into the lesser-known stories that shaped our world. Today, we're going back to a pivotal point in American history, one that's often overlooked but has had a lasting impact on the nation's psyche. We're talking about the forgotten massacre of Tulsa, Oklahoma, a tragedy that unfolded in just one night, yet left a trail of devastation that would be felt for generations to come. Let's set the scene. June 1st, 1921. A hot summer evening in the city of Tulsa, which was then experiencing an unprecedented oil boom. The streets were alive with activity. African American men, women, and children were out celebrating, enjoying the newfound prosperity that had brought them to this part of Oklahoma. But beneath the surface of this thriving community lay a cauldron of racial tension. The Greenwood district, as it came to be known, was home to some of the wealthiest African Americans in the United States. Here, entrepreneurs and innovators had created a thriving commercial hub, complete with restaurants, shops, hotels, and even an African American newspaper. But for how long? It's been said that the seeds of destruction were sown years before, during World War I. As American soldiers returned from Europe, they brought back stories of Jim Crow laws and racial segregation. These same soldiers had witnessed firsthand the atrocities committed against African Americans in the South, and many vowed to fight for change upon their return. However, not all shared this vision. White Oklahomans, like the notorious Tulsa County Sheriff, Willard McCullough, harbored deep-seated prejudices against the growing African American population. McCullough had a reputation for being one of the most racist lawmen in the country, and his hatred towards blacks would soon have disastrous consequences. In the years leading up to 1921, tension simmered just below the surface. Racial incidents became more frequent. African Americans were often denied access to local businesses, restaurants, or hotels. The once thriving community began to feel increasingly isolated and frustrated. And then it happened. On June 1st, 1921, a chain reaction of events would unfold, sparking one of the most devastating racial massacres in American history. Now, it's worth noting that this story has been shrouded in controversy for decades. Many historians have argued over its accuracy or lack thereof. What we do know is that on that fateful evening, 300 African American men gathered at the local First Baptist Church to protest a recent incident involving a black man being arrested by the police. The man's name was Dick Rowland, and his crime? Allegedly, he'd been accused of assaulting a white elevator operator. This charge would set off a chain reaction of events that would culminate in the destruction of an entire community. But let's for a moment just imagine being part of this gathering, surrounded by hundreds of men who were fighting for their rights and dignity. The air was thick with anticipation, hope, and perhaps even fear. As we continue to unravel the threads of this story, it becomes clear that a small group of white men, including a prominent local businessman named A.D. Murray, had been stirring up anti-black sentiment in the days leading up to the massacre. These men, fueled by prejudice and hatred, saw an opportunity to exploit Rowland incidents as a pretext for violence against Greenwood's African American residents. And on that fateful night, they seized it with devastating consequences. The next installment of our documentary will explore the events that unfolded in the early hours of June 1st, 1921. We'll delve deeper into the chaos and destruction that ravaged the Greenwood district, leaving hundreds dead or injured and thousands more displaced.
Join us next time as we continue to uncover the forgotten story of Tulsa's massacre, a tragedy that would forever change the fabric of American history.
As the sun set on June 1st, 1921, the atmosphere in Greenwood was tense but hopeful. The gathering at First Baptist Church had been peaceful, with speakers urging calm and restraint. But just as it seemed like a resolution might be reached, a group of white men, armed to the teeth, descended upon the church. They were led by A.D. Murray and other prominent local businessmen who had been secretly organizing a paramilitary unit known as the Tulsa Rioting Committee. The white mob stormed into the church, guns drawn, and began firing into the crowd. Panic erupted as the African-American men scrambled to escape. Some tried to flee through the doors, while others attempted to find cover in nearby buildings. Rioters were relentless, chasing their victims down the streets of Greenwood. As the chaos spread, white civilians joined in, some claiming they were simply trying to restore order or protect their property. In reality, they were participating in a coordinated effort to destroy an entire community. Buildings were set ablaze, homes were ransacked, and people were hunted down like prey. Eyewitness accounts from the time described the scene as apocalyptic. African-American residents of Greenwood reported seeing white mobs armed with guns, bats, and bottles descending upon their neighborhood. The screams of the terrified victims still echo through history books to this day. One survivor, a young woman named Alberta, later recounted the horrors she witnessed. "I was hiding in my attic when I saw them coming up the street. They were shouting and screaming, waving guns and clubs. I thought it was the end of the world. My family tried to flee, but they chased us down the street, shooting at us with guns. As the night wore on, the destruction only intensified. Homes, businesses, and even churches were reduced to smoldering ruins. Entire city blocks were laid waste to, leaving hundreds homeless. The exact number of fatalities will never be known for certain, but estimates range from 100 to over 300 people killed that night alone. Many more would perish in the days and weeks that followed as a result of their injuries or exposure to the elements. But the carnage was not limited to human life. The Greenwood district, once a thriving economic hub with its own police force and mayor, was left in ruins. Homes were reduced to ashes, businesses were looted and burned, and the very fabric of the community was torn apart. As the sun rose on June 2nd, 1921, an eerie silence fell over the devastated neighborhood. Survivors emerged from their hiding places to survey the destruction around them. The once thriving streets were now littered with debris and the bodies of those who had perished in the violence. In the aftermath, authorities would claim that a riot had broken out, with both sides responsible for the chaos. But the evidence tells a different story, one of premeditation, racism, and a deliberate attempt to erase an entire community from existence. And yet, despite its significance, this event was largely erased from American history. The Tulsa Massacre was quietly buried, along with the lives and stories of those who were lost. In the days and weeks that followed, the city of Tulsa struggled to come to terms with the scale of the destruction. The Oklahoma state legislature established a commission to investigate the events leading up to the massacre, but its report was inconclusive and failed to assign blame. Meanwhile, survivors were left to pick up the pieces and rebuild their lives. The aftermath of the massacre saw a massive influx of aid pour into Tulsa from across the country. Organizations such as the NAACP and the American Red Cross provided food, shelter, and medical care to those in need. Despite these efforts, the wounds of Greenwood would take years to heal. Many survivors chose not to rebuild their homes or businesses, citing the trauma they had experienced and the lingering fear of violence. Others attempted to revive the community, but it was a slow process. The economic vitality that once defined Greenwood was lost forever. As the years passed, the story of the Tulsa Massacre faded from public memory. It was as if the event never occurred. Erased from history by a combination of official indifference and white supremacist ideology. But for those who lived through it, the trauma lingered on. Alberta Williams, one of the survivors I mentioned earlier, would later speak out about her experiences in an effort to keep the story alive.
She recounted how she had spent years trying to rebuild her life, but was haunted by the memories of that night. "I couldn't shake the image of my mother's body lying in the street," she said. "It took me decades to come to terms with what happened." The loss of Greenwood was not just a destruction, but also an erasure of culture and identity. The community had been built on the principles of self-reliance and economic empowerment, and its destruction marked a devastating blow to the aspirations of African Americans in Oklahoma. As we reflect on this event today, it is clear that the legacy of the Tulsa Massacre continues to shape American society in profound ways. It speaks to the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality, as well as the ongoing quest for truth and accountability. In recent years, there has been a growing effort to recognize and reckon with the history of the Tulsa Massacre. In 1997, the Oklahoma State Legislature passed a resolution acknowledging the event as a crime against humanity. And in 2019, the city of Tulsa dedicated a memorial park to. But more needs to be done. The story of Greenwood must continue to be told and retold, so that future generations can learn from the mistakes of the past. Only through acknowledging our shared history, including its darkest moments, can we hope to build a brighter future for all. Today, as we stand on the site of what once was Greenwood District, it is hard not to feel a sense of sorrow and regret. But it is also possible to feel a sense of pride and determination. Pride in the resilience and courage of those who lived through the massacre. Determination to ensure that such an event never happens again. The story of the Tulsa Massacre serves as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality in America. But it also offers a glimmer of hope, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to persevere in the face of adversity and to rebuild from the ashes of destruction. As we walk through the ruins of Greenwood, it's easy to imagine the vibrant streets that once thrived here. The sounds of laughter, music, and commerce filled the air as African Americans built a community that was truly their own. From the bustling businesses to the beautiful homes, Greenwood was a testament to the power of self-determination and economic empowerment. But on June 1st, 1921, all of this came crashing down. A white mob descended upon Greenwood, armed with guns, bombs, and a deep-seated hatred for African Americans. The attacks were swift and brutal, with homes and businesses being burned to the ground. Survivors recall hearing the screams of their neighbors as they fled for their lives in the dead of night. The exact number of deaths that night will never be known, but estimates range from 100 to over 300. Many of the victims were women, children, and the elderly, who were either killed or left homeless in the chaos. The trauma and devastation by this event would take years to recover from, and its impact can still be felt today. One survivor, Mrs. Porter. Clara Luper vividly recalls the events of that fateful night. She was just 12 years old at the time, but the memories of seeing her family's home burned down have stayed with her forever. "I'll never forget the sound of my mother's screams," she says, her voice trembling even now. The aftermath of the massacre saw a massive displacement of African Americans from Greenwood, as many were forced to flee or seek refuge elsewhere in the city. Those who remained faced widespread destruction, with homes and businesses lying in ruins. The community was shattered, both physically and emotionally. But despite the devastation, the spirit of Greenwood refused to die. Survivors like Mrs. Close, Luper and others began to rebuild, starting anew from scratch. They organized fundraising campaigns, collected donations, and worked tirelessly to restore their community. Today, we see a mix of emotions as we walk through this historic site. Sorrow for what was lost, anger at the injustice perpetrated against African Americans, but also pride in the resilience and determination that defined Greenwood's people. It is essential to recognize the significance of the Tulsa Massacre within the broader context of American history.
It happened during a time when racial tensions were running high across the country, with Jim Crow laws enforcing segregation in many states. The events of 1921 serve as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality in America. As we continue to confront the darker aspects of our shared past, it becomes increasingly clear that the story of Greenwood is not just a local or regional issue, but has national and international implications. It raises essential questions about what kind of society we want to be. One where people can live free from persecution, fear, and hate. We take a moment to pause at the site where the original African American hospital stood. Today, it's now a memorial dedicated to those who lost their lives during the massacre. We see plaques and statues telling the story of Greenwood and its resilience in the face of adversity. Here, we come face to face with the stark reality that America has struggled for decades to acknowledge the brutal treatment of African Americans. From American genocide to slavery, Jim Crow laws, lynchings, and forced segregation, there's a long list of injustices committed against communities of. But alongside these painful chapters in our collective history, we find examples of courage, resilience, and determination that embody the very spirit of America, a nation built on diversity, unity, and hope. On a sweltering summer evening, June 1st, 1921, the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was about to witness one of the darkest chapters in American history. The Greenwood district, once a thriving hub of black entrepreneurship and culture, would be reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. We're standing here today in what's now known as the Greenwood Cultural Center, but back then it was the epicenter of African American prosperity. The year was 1920, and Tulsa's black population had grown from just 150 residents at the turn of the century to over 10,000. It was a time of great change, as the Great Migration brought thousands of Southern blacks north in search of better lives. Greenwood was more than just a district, it was a beacon of hope. The likes of O.W. Gurley, who built the first black-owned bank in the city, and A.J. Smitherman, publisher of the Tulsa Star newspaper, were just two of the many successful entrepreneurs who made Greenwood their home. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. As one historian noted, Tulsa was a city that wore a mask of racial harmony. However, as we delve deeper into this story, you'll see how that mask hid deep-seated prejudices and fear-mongering. The seeds of destruction were sown on a chilly April evening in 1921, when Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoeshiner, was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator, Sarah Page. The incident sparked outrage among the city's whites, who were quick to jump on the bandwagon. Now, it's essential to understand that this incident wasn't an isolated event.
For years, white Oklahomans had been quietly agitating for segregation and exclusion of black businesses from downtown Tulsa.
And now they saw their chance. On June 1st, a local newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune, published a story with the inflammatory headline, "Nab Negro for attacking elevator girl in an attempt to rape her." Over the next few days, by June 2nd, things had escalated. A group of black business owners and community leaders met at the local NAACP office to discuss a potential lynching. But as one eyewitness recounted, the whites were already talking about burning Greenwood down. As night fell on that fateful evening, over 600 soldiers from the Oklahoma National Guard descended upon the city. The stated purpose: to quell the rioting and protect citizens' property. In reality, it was a thinly veiled excuse. What followed was chaos, gunfire, screams, and the sounds of buildings being reduced to rubble. One local resident remembered, "I saw men, white men with guns, going into our neighborhood, shooting at anything that moved." Within hours, hundreds of homes, businesses, and the once thriving Greenwood district was now a smoldering ruin. Property damage was estimated at over $1 million, an astronomical sum for the time. But it wasn't just property that suffered. As many as 300 black residents were injured, with estimates suggesting that between 50 to 200 people lost their lives in those few hours of unbridled violence. Those who managed to escape were forced into internment camps, where they faced further mistreatment and humiliation. The city's mayor at the time, G.E. Acuff, infamously declared, "If the racial slurs had been killed, I would have saved the taxpayers thousands." As one historian observed, the massacre was more than just a destruction of property. It was an attempt. So why did this atrocity occur in 1921? It's essential to understand the historical context. The Red Summer of 1919 had seen riots and lynchings erupt across the United States, as whites reacted to what they perceived as the Negro menace. In Oklahoma specifically, a culture of white supremacy had the state's laws and social norms were designed to maintain racial segregation and suppress black progress. The story of Greenwood is often overlooked in American history books, but its legacy continues to resonate today. We still grapple with systematic racism and economic inequality, echoes of the very same issues that plagued this once thriving community. As we reflect on these events, it's essential to remember the human cost. The lives lost, the families torn apart, the businesses destroyed, and the dreams shattered. Their stories remind us that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a living, breathing tapestry of human experience. We've heard from historians and eyewitnesses. We mustn't forget the ordinary people who lived through this horror. The likes of Viola Fletcher, whose home was destroyed in the riot, still remembers the day she lost everything. "I never got over it," she said decades later. "It's like a wound that won't heal." Greenwood's story serves as a stark reminder of what happens when we fail to confront and address our darker impulses. It highlights the urgent need for truth-telling, reconciliation, and justice, not just in Tulsa, but across America. The Forgotten Massacre of Greenwood is more than just an episode in history. It's a testament to the enduring power of human resilience. As one survivor said, "We survived because we had each other." The summer of 1921 was a time of great change and upheaval in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The city was experiencing rapid growth and economic expansion, with many African Americans migrating from the rural South to take advantage of the new opportunities. Greenwood, once a small farming community, had evolved into a thriving black metropolis, earning the nickname the Black Wall Street due to its vibrant commercial district. By 1921, it boasted over 200 businesses, including restaurants, theaters, and clothing stores. However, not everyone was pleased with the progress being made by African Americans in Greenwood. White Tulsans, fueled by racial animosity and economic jealousy, had long harbored resentment towards the growing black community. Racial tensions had been simmering for years, but they finally boiled over on May 31st, 1921. The spark that set off the violence was a seemingly minor incident at the local jail. A white man named Dick Rowland, who worked as a janitor, was arrested after allegedly assaulting a young white woman named Sarah Page in an elevator. The situation quickly escalated into a full-blown riot, with hundreds of armed white men descending upon Greenwood to protect their women and property. As the chaos spread, African Americans fought back against the marauding mob, but they were vastly outnumbered. Despite vastly outgunned, many blacks refused to give up, fighting for their homes, businesses, and families. One eyewitness described the scene. "It was like a war zone, with people running everywhere, screaming and crying. I saw buildings burning, cars overturned, and people lying in the streets." The violence continued unchecked for over 24 hours, leaving behind a trail of destruction and devastation. The true extent of the carnage was staggering. Homes were reduced to rubble, businesses were looted or burned, and entire city blocks were rendered uninhabitable. Estimates suggest that between 100 to 300 people lost their lives in the massacre, with many more injured or displaced. The aftermath saw widespread arrests of African Americans, many of whom were later convicted on dubious charges. Several whites involved in the violence were tried but ultimately acquitted. The city's response was one of denial and obfuscation. Mayor John A. Hart, a prominent white businessman, downplayed the severity of the events, claiming that nothing much happened during the riot. He even went so far as to claim that black residents had started the fires themselves. This narrative persisted for decades, with many Oklahomans denying any responsibility or wrongdoing. The legacy of the massacre continued long after the flames had been extinguished. In the years following 1921, Greenwood never fully recovered from its devastating blow. Many of its businesses were forced to close, and thousands of black residents were forced to flee or seek refuge in other parts of the city. Today, as we reflect on this dark chapter in American history, it's essential to confront the truth about what happened.
We must acknowledge the racist ideology that fueled the violence and recognize the ongoing impact it has had on African Americans in Tulsa and across the country.
The survivors' stories serve as a powerful reminder of the resilience and strength of those who suffered through this ordeal. In recent years, there have been efforts to confront the past and provide some measure of justice for the families affected by the massacre. In 1997, the Oklahoma State Legislature passed a resolution apologizing for the violence and its aftermath. This step towards acknowledging the wrongs of the past was long overdue, but it marked an important turning point in the city's journey toward healing. As one survivor noted, the wounds may still be open, but they're not as raw. We've learned to live with them. But even as the resolution was passed, many questions about the massacre remained unanswered. What exactly triggered the violence? Who were the key figures involved in planning and executing the attacks? And what role did local law enforcement play in enabling or even participating in the bloodshed? These questions continue to plague historians and researchers for decades. One of the most significant challenges in uncovering the truth about the massacre was the lack of documentation. Many records from the time period were either destroyed, lost, or never existed in the first place. The city's official archives contained few mentions of the event, and even fewer details about what led up to it. This absence of documentation made it difficult for researchers to piece together a clear narrative of events. However, through tireless efforts by local historians, journalists, and community activists, a more complete picture began to emerge. These individuals scoured old newspapers, interviewed survivors, and combed through court transcripts in search of clues about the massacre's origins and aftermath. They discovered that tensions between white and black residents had been simmering for years, fueled by racist attitudes and economic competition. One of the key events leading up to the massacre was a controversial trial involving Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old African-American shoe shiner who allegedly assaulted a white woman in an elevator. The incident sparked outrage among local whites, who accused black residents of being up and overstepping their boundaries. Rumors spread that black men were accosting white women with impunity, leading to widespread anger and frustration. On the of June 1, 1921, a white mob began marching through Greenwood streets, intent on exacting revenge against the black community. The violence that followed was swift and merciless, with homes, businesses, and entire city blocks reduced to rubble. African American residents were forced to flee for their lives, many leaving behind everything they had ever known. In the aftermath of the massacre, the city's response was characterized by a curious mixture of denial and repression. Mayor Hart continued to downplay the severity of the event, claiming that it was nothing more than a minor disturbance. He even went so far as to establish an emergency committee tasked with investigating the events and making recommendations for future prevention. But this committee proved to be little more than a whitewash operation, designed to protect white interests, rather than uncovering the truth. The lack of accountability and transparency surrounding the massacre
had long-term consequences for the Black community in Tulsa. Many residents struggled to rebuild their lives, forced to navigate a city where they were no longer welcome. The destruction of Greenwood's business district meant that many families lost their livelihoods, leaving them vulnerable to poverty and exploitation. The psychological trauma inflicted by the event also took years to heal. In recent years, however, there have been efforts to restore some measure of justice and recognition for the victims and survivors of the massacre. In 2009, a mass grave was discovered in Oaklawn Cemetery, containing the remains of dozens of African American residents who perished during the violence. The discovery sparked renewed calls for action, with many advocates demanding greater acknowledgement and reparations from the city. As we continue to grapple with this painful chapter in our nation's history, it's essential to confront the ongoing impact of the massacre on contemporary society. We must acknowledge the systemic racism that underpinned the violence, recognizing how these same attitudes continue to influence law enforcement practices, economic development policies, and social relations today. The story of the Tulsa Massacre serves as a stark reminder that our collective memory is fragile and often fraught with erasure. It's up to us to ensure that this dark chapter in American history is not forgotten, but rather confronted head-on. By doing so, we can work towards healing and reconciliation, fostering a more equitable society for all. On a sweltering summer evening, June 1st, 1921, the tranquil streets of Tulsa's Greenwood district bustled with activity. This affluent African-American neighborhood, known as the Black Wall Street, was a testament to the resilience and determination of its residents. It was a community that had risen from the ashes of segregation and oppression, where Black entrepreneurs, artists, and intellectuals thrived. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air grew thick with anticipation. Thousands had gathered in the streets, drawn by rumors of a lynching. A white man, John Scott, accused of assaulting a 17-year-old white girl, Sarah Page, was being held at the local jail. Tensions between the Black and white communities had been simmering for years, and this incident seemed to be the spark that would ignite the flames. The Greenwood district was a marvel of African-American ingenuity. Founded in 1906 by O.W. Gurley, a Black real estate agent, it quickly grew into a thriving commercial hub. The neighborhood boasted beautiful homes, upscale shops, restaurants, and even its own bank, hospital, and newspaper. It was a place where Black people could live, work, and socialize without the restrictions of segregation. As the night wore on, a mob of white men, armed with rifles and torches, descended upon Greenwood. The initial reports suggested that they were there to lynch John Scott, but it soon became clear that their intentions were far more sinister. The mob, estimated to be around 1,500 strong, began to systematically raze the neighborhood to the ground. Buildings were set ablaze, homes were looted, and businesses were destroyed. The sounds of screams, gunfire, and shattering glass filled the air as the mob tore through the streets. The Black residents of Greenwood were forced to flee for their lives, many leaving behind everything they owned. The destruction was nothing short of apocalyptic. Fire hoses, meant to extinguish the flames, were instead used to direct water at the fleeing residents, forcing them back into the inferno. The screams of women and children still haunt the memories of those who survived that night. As the chaos raged on, a group of Black men, led by the local leader, Richard M. Griffith, attempted to organize a defense. Armed with little more than shotguns and pistols, they stood their ground against the invading mob. But it was a losing battle. The sheer numbers and firepower of the white rioters proved too great, and the defenders were eventually overwhelmed. The night wore on, and the destruction continued unabated. Estimates suggest that between 75 to 300 people lost their lives in the ensuing chaos, although some reports put the figure as high as 1,500. The true number may never be known, but one thing is certain:
The massacre was a deliberate act of racial violence, orchestrated by the white power structures of Tulsa. The aftermath of the massacre was marked by a chilling silence. The local authorities, led by Mayor T.D. Evans and Police Chief John A. Gustafson, seemed more interested in quelling any potential unrest than in investigating the atrocities that had taken place. It would take decades for the truth about that night to emerge. One of the most disturbing aspects of the massacre was the involvement of local politicians and business leaders. Many of these men had invested heavily in the Greenwood district, and their losses were substantial. Yet, rather than speak out against the violence, they remained eerily silent. In fact, some even participated in the destruction, with Mayor Evans himself allegedly leading a group of rioters. The national media was equally complicit in covering up the truth. The New York Times, in particular, reported on the event with a disturbing lack of urgency or outrage. "Royo erupts at Tulsa," read the headline, downplaying the severity of the violence. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the Greenwood district lay in ruins. The once thriving community was reduced to smoldering rubble, its residents forced to flee or hide in fear lives. The trauma inflicted that night would take generations to heal. In the years following the massacre, a number of investigations were conducted, but none of them could fully account for the scale and severity of the violence. It wasn't until 1997 that a state-led commission finally acknowledged the atrocity as a genocide. But even this was a partial admission, with many still disputing the true extent of the carnage. Today, as we reflect on this pivotal moment in American history, it is clear that the massacre of Tulsa's Greenwood district was more than just a random act of violence. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy an entire community, born from the racist ideologies that had long plagued our nation. The legacy of that night continues to haunt us, a stark reminder of the brutal treatment meted out to African Americans during this period. As we strive for greater understanding and empathy in our modern world, it is essential that we confront the painful truth about our shared past. For only by acknowledging these dark chapters can we hope to build a brighter future. The massacre at Tulsa's Greenwood district was a moment of unbridled racial hatred, one that continues to resonate through the decades. And yet, even in its destruction, lies a testament to the strength and resilience of those who were affected. Their stories, though often overlooked, serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring power of human spirit. In the years since 1921, much has changed. But for the survivors of that night, their memories remain etched in their minds like an open wound. They are a living testament to the horrors they endured and continue to endure. Their voices must be heard, their stories told, so that we may learn from our past and strive towards a brighter future. As we remember this tragic event, we are reminded of the ongoing struggle for racial equality in America. We think of the countless lives lost, the families torn apart, and the communities ravaged by hate and violence. And we know that there is still so much work to be done. But even as we confront these painful truths, we also remember the indomitable spirits of those who survived, rebuilt, and continue to thrive in the face of unimaginable adversity. Theirs is a testament to the human capacity for forgiveness, love, and resilience. In the words of historian Carter G. Woodson, the history of humanity will be written in 4 colors: black, white, red, and yellow. The most important one, however, will be the black one. We owe it to ourselves, our children, and future generations to confront this chapter of American history head on. And as we close this episode of Forgotten History Daily, we are reminded that the story of Tulsa's Greenwood district is not just a relic of the past, but also a powerful call to action. It serves as a warning about the dangers of unchecked prejudice, hatred, and intolerance. And it stands as a testament to the enduring power of love, community, and resilience. In these quiet moments of reflection, we honor the memories of those who lost their lives in this senseless tragedy. We remember their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. And we recommit ourselves to creating a brighter future for all people, where every individual can live with dignity and respect. The forgotten massacre at Tulsa's Greenwood district remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. But it also offers us an opportunity to confront our shared past, learn from our mistakes, and forge a more just and equitable society for generations to come. As we delve deeper into the story of the Tulsa Massacre, it's essential to set the stage for this tragic event. The Greenwood district, also known as the Black Wall Street, was a thriving African-American community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that had grown exponentially during the 1920s and 1930s. This vibrant neighborhood was home to successful entrepreneurs, musicians, artists, and families who had built lives for themselves, despite the rampant racism and segregation of the time. Greenwood's main street, known as Greenwood Avenue, was lined with upscale shops, restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues that catered specifically to African-American patrons. The district was a symbol of Black excellence and self-sufficiency, where individuals could find employment, education, healthcare, and other essential services without being forced to navigate the discriminatory policies. However, as with so many remarkable achievements in African-American history, the growth and prosperity of Greenwood came at a price. The district's success attracted attention from those who resented its very existence, whites who saw it as an affront to their supremacy and a threat to economic interests. This enmity was fueled by the Great Depression, which had left many white Oklahomans struggling economically. In June 1921, a local newspaper published a story that claimed a young African-American man had been accused of assaulting a white woman in nearby Sand Springs, Oklahoma. The incident sparked outrage among whites in Tulsa, who began to organize a lynch mob. Despite the fact that there was no concrete evidence linking the alleged perpetrator to the crime, and despite protests from local authorities and civil rights leaders, a crowd of over 1,000 armed men descended upon the subsequent 18-hour siege saw the destruction of hundreds of homes, businesses, and churches. The exact number of fatalities will never be known, but estimates range from as few as 26 to as many as 300 or more people killed in cold blood. Many others were left injured, displaced, and traumatized by the experience. Eyewitness accounts describe the horror of that night, the screams of terrified civilians, the smell of burning buildings and the stench of death, and the sound of gunfire ripping through the streets. Survivors spoke of how they watched as their homes, life's work, and entire living was reduced to ashes before their eyes. Smitherman, a respected African-American physician in Tulsa, later recounted, "I saw men walking up and down the street, shooting people on sight. It was like they were hunting deer." He continued, "The only thing I could think of at that moment was to save my family." Despite the scale of destruction, the victims were met with a peculiar kind of indifference. When local authorities finally intervened, they seemed more concerned with maintaining order and restoring property than in addressing the underlying racial tensions or holding accountable those responsible for them. As we reflect on this pivotal event in American history, it's essential to acknowledge that the Tulsa Massacre was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a long tradition of racial terror that has scarred our nation from its founding. From the transatlantic slave trade and the forced labor camps of the antebellum era to the present-day struggles for justice and equality, we must confront this complex and painful history with humility, compassion, and a commitment. In our next episode, we'll delve deeper into the aftermath of the massacre and its impact on the survivors, as well as the broader consequences for American society. We'll examine how the event has been remembered and commemorated over the years, often in ways that obscure rather than confront the full extent of what transpired. And we'll discuss the ongoing efforts to honor the memories of those who lost their lives and create a more just and equitable society, one where every individual can live with dignity and respect. The year was 1921, and the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was a place of contrasts. It was a boomtown, fueled by the discovery of oil in the early 1900s, with millionaires and billionaires living alongside dirt-poor farmers and laborers. But amidst this prosperity, a dark secret lurked, waiting to be unleashed. At the heart of Tulsa's vibrant African-American community lay Greenwood, a neighborhood so affluent it was dubbed Black Wall Street. The sons and daughters of former slaves had built a thriving commercial district. They were proud, ambitious people, driven by the promise of a brighter future. One of the most prominent residents of Greenwood was A.C. Jackson, a self-made millionaire who had built his fortune through real estate and entrepreneurship. A charming and charismatic figure, known for his sharp business acumen and philanthropic endeavors, Jackson was the epitome of African-American success in the 1920s. He owned several properties in Greenwood, including the Jackson Hotel, which served as a social hub for the community. However, not everyone shared the vision of prosperity and equality that A.C. Jackson represented. In Tulsa's white elite, there were those who saw the rise of Black Wall Street as a threat to their power and privilege. Men like H.C.
Roediger Jr., a wealthy oilman and civic leader, had long harbored resentment towards the African-American community. Roediger was instrumental in orchestrating the destruction of Greenwood, using influence and connections to whip up racial tensions.
On June 1st, 1921, the seeds of disaster were sown when Dick Rowland, a young black shoe shiner, stepped into an elevator at Drexel's department store with a white woman. The incident sparked outrage among the city's white population, who accused Rowland of assault. But the real catalyst for violence was H.C.
Roediger Jr.'s inflammatory speeches and editorial articles, which whipped up hysteria and fueled racial animosity.
As tensions escalated, the Ku Klux Klan, with its hooded members and fiery rhetoric, marched through the streets, fueling a sense of urgency among the white population to take action against those people. In a sinister display of orchestrated chaos, a small group of African-American veterans attempted to defend their community, but were vastly outnumbered by the mob. Under the cover of darkness on June 1st, Tulsa's white mobs descended upon Greenwood like a tornado. The sound of gunfire and screams filled the night air as buildings burned. Families fled for their lives, and the neighborhood was left in ashes. It would later be reported that over 300 people were killed, countless homes and businesses destroyed, and more than 1,000 African Americans left homeless. The following morning, an eerie calm descended upon the city, with National Guardsmen stationed along the borders of Greenwood to ensure the white mobs did not return. Amidst this backdrop of devastation, Mayor Charles Kelly issued a statement denying any knowledge of the events that had transpired. The authorities would later claim that they had been caught off guard by the violence. In reality, Mayor Kelly was well aware of the unfolding drama and had actively worked to suppress news of the massacre. He even went so far as to order a curfew on June 1st, preventing African American survivors from reporting the atrocities committed against them. As the nation struggled to comprehend the full extent of the destruction, A.C. Jackson emerged as one of the leading voices advocating for justice and reparations for the victims. His impassioned speeches and interviews called attention to the systematic persecution of Greenwood's residents and served as a rallying cry for the African American community across America. Despite his efforts, however, the wheels of justice ground slowly. The Tulsa Riots Commission, established by Governor J. Bartlett in 1921, would later be criticized for its narrow focus on the destruction of property, rather than addressing the root causes of the violence and the systemic racism that underpinned it. One individual who played a key role in bringing attention to the massacre was Oklahoma's own Senator Robert Latham Owen. A passionate advocate for social justice, Owen had been monitoring events in Tulsa with growing concern and eventually wrote to President Warren G. Harding, highlighting the severity of the situation. His efforts, however, were largely ignored by the White House. In the aftermath of the massacre, both the city's black population and its white elite struggled to come to terms with what had transpired. As a nation, America was grappling with its own internal contradictions between progress and stagnation, freedom and oppression. Jackson continued his tireless efforts to rebuild Greenwood, but he would eventually meet a tragic end in 1951 when he was killed in a hit-and-run accident. The circumstances surrounding his death remain shrouded in mystery, leaving many to wonder whether it was more than just an unfortunate coincidence. Rodiger Jr.'s legacy is forever tainted by his role in orchestrating the destruction of Greenwood. His family would later downplay their involvement, claiming he had acted out of a sense of civic duty rather than racial hatred. Yet the truth remains that Rodiger's actions on June 1, 1921, were pivotal in unleashing chaos and destruction upon an unsuspecting community. In recent years, there has been growing recognition of the importance of confronting this dark chapter in American history. The massacre at Greenwood was not a singular event, but rather the culmination of decades of systemic racism and violence inflicted upon African Americans across the nation. Today, as we reflect on these pivotal events, it becomes increasingly clear that they hold valuable lessons for us all. The story of Tulsa's forgotten massacre serves as a poignant reminder of America's capacity for both greatness and atrocity. It challenges our collective narrative, triumphs, and struggles of African Americans in the 20th century, and demands that we re-examine our shared history with candor, compassion, and an unflinching commitment. As the night wears on and memories of Tulsa's forgotten massacre fade into the shadows, we are left to ponder the legacies of those who lived through this defining moment. What lessons will carry forward from their struggles? And how can we ensure that such catastrophic events never recur in our history books? As the 1950s and 1960s gave way to a new era of civil rights activism, the story of Greenwood's destruction remained largely untold. However, whispers of the massacre continued to circulate among the community, serving as a painful reminder of what had been lost. It wasn't until the publication of the book, The Tulsa Riot, a report by the Oklahoma Commission to study the 1921 riot, in 2001, that the full extent of the violence became widely known. Written by Mabelline Brown, the report painted a graphic picture of the events leading up to and following the massacre. It revealed that on the night of June 1st, 1921, white mobs had descended upon Greenwood, attacking homes, businesses, and churches with impunity. The violence was not only directed at residents, but also targeted their properties, leaving entire city blocks in. The report detailed eyewitness accounts from survivors who described scenes of utter chaos and destruction. Some spoke of watching as flames engulfed homes, while others recounted being forced to flee for their lives. Many reported seeing the bodies of loved ones. Some had been lynched or beaten to death. One survivor, 12-year-old Ozzie Coleman, recalled the terror she felt that night. "I was in bed when I heard the noise. It sounded like a war. People were running and screaming. My mom grabbed me and we ran out into the street. We saw our house on fire, and people were trying to save what they could." As Rome's report shed light on the events of that fateful night, it also highlighted the role of government agencies and local authorities in documents revealed that the police department had failed to intervene despite receiving pleas for help from African American residents. Instead, officers were accused of participating in the destruction, or at best, turning a blind eye. The publication of Round's report marked a significant shift in public perception about the events of June 1st, 1921. It sparked a wave of community-led efforts to memorialize and honor the victims of the massacre. In 2019, the Greenwood Art Park was dedicated as a tribute to the resilience and strength of the community.
However, even as the nation begins to confront this dark chapter in its history, there remains much work to be done. Many residents continue to suffer from what has come to be known as historical trauma, a phenomenon where past injustices are carried forward through intergenerational pain and suffering. For Ozzy Coleman, now an elderly woman, the memories of that night still linger vividly in her mind. Even after all these years, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about what happened. It's like it was just yesterday. Her eyes well up with tears as she reflects on the devastation. I thought we were living in a country where everyone had an equal chance. But that wasn't true. As America struggles to come to terms with its complicated past, Coleman's story serves as a poignant reminder of the ongoing impact of historical trauma. The path forward will require more than just acknowledgement. It demands a commitment to justice and recognition. In the aftermath of the massacre, A.C. Jackson, for a thriving African-American community in Greenwood, remained an unfulfilled dream. However, his legacy lives on through the countless individuals who continue to work towards healing and redemption. Their stories offer hope that one day America will truly become a nation where everyone has an equal chance, free from the shadows of its troubled past. The story of Greenwood and its people is a testament to the enduring power of resilience and determination. In the years following the massacre, many survived forced their homes, scattering across the country in search of safety and stability. Some found work as migrant laborers, while others attempted to rebuild their lives in distant cities. But despite the devastation they had endured, a sense of community and shared purpose continued to drive them forward. One such survivor was Odie Harris, who would become a prominent civil rights leader. Harris was just a teenager when he watched his family's business burn to the ground on June 1st, 1921. He remembered the smell of smoke and ash, the sound of gunfire and screams filling the air. But even as he struggled to come to terms with what had happened, Harris found strength in the bond that held his community together. "We were a family," he said in an interview many years later. "We looked out for each other, cared for one another. And when the world seemed to be against us, we found ways to keep moving forward." Harris's experiences during and after the massacre would shape him into a lifelong advocate for social justice. He went on to work alongside figures like Martin Luther King Jr., helping to organize sit-ins, protests, and other civil rights campaigns. Though he faced numerous challenges and setbacks along the way, Harris never lost sight of his goal: creating a more equitable society where all people could thrive. The struggle to rebuild Greenwood was led in part by another survivor, Edna Hill. A young woman at the time of the massacre, Hill had watched as her family's home and business were destroyed. But even as she struggled to find a place to live, Hill remained committed to preserving the legacy of her community. "I remembered what my parents told me," she said in an interview. "They said that we couldn't let the white man break us. We had to hold on to our dignity, our culture, and our sense of self-worth." Hill's determination helped spark a wave of community-led initiatives aimed at revitalizing Greenwood. She organized fundraisers, rallied support from local businesses, and even worked with city officials to secure funding for rebuilding efforts. But as the years passed, it became clear that rebuilding wasn't enough. The legacy of the massacre continued to haunt the city, manifesting in forms both subtle and overt. Many residents reported feeling a deep-seated fear or mistrust, particularly when interacting with law enforcement. This intergenerational pain would come to be known as historical trauma, a phenomenon where past injustices are carried forward through collective suffering. For many survivors like Odie Harris, Ozzy Coleman, and Edna Hill, the memories of that night remained etched in their minds like an open wound. Even decades later, they would wake up in the middle of the night, reliving the trauma of June 1st, 1921. As America continues to grapple with its complicated past, the story of Greenwood serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing impact
of historical trauma. But even amidst the pain and sorrow, there is hope, a glimmer of resilience that refuses to be extinguished. In recent years, efforts have been made to confront this painful chapter in American history. The Greenwood Art Park was dedicated in 2019, a tribute to the strength and determination of the community that once thrived there. And though much work remains to be done, it is clear that the survivors of the massacre will continue to drive the conversation forward. Their stories, their struggles, and their resilience serving as a beacon of hope. As Ozzy Coleman so eloquently put it, we thought we were living in a country where everyone had an equal chance. But that wasn't true. Yet, even as she speaks these words, there is a sense of resolve etched on her face, a determination to see the promise of America fulfilled, and a community rebuilt upon the ashes of its troubled past. June 1st, 1921, a sweltering summer evening in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The city was alive with the sounds of jazz music and laughter as the vibrant Greenwood district bustled with activity. Known as the Black Wall Street, this affluent African-American community was a beacon of hope and prosperity for thousands of Black Americans who had fled the South during the Great Migration. At its peak, Greenwood boasted over 40 businesses, banks, restaurants, hotels, and even an oil company. The district's residents were known for their entrepreneurial spirit, with many owning their own homes and properties. It was a place where Black people could live, work, and thrive without the Jim Crow laws that restricted their rights in other parts of the country. But on this fateful night, the tranquility of Greenwood was shattered by the arrival of white vigilantes, armed to the teeth and fueled by racist hatred. A 19-year-old Black man named Dick Rowland had been accused of assaulting a white elevator operator, Sarah Page. The accusation sparked outrage among the city's white population, who demanded justice for their alleged victim. As the night wore on, a mob of over 1,000 whites descended upon Greenwood, torching businesses and homes with impunity. The police, instead of protecting the Black community, actively participated in the destruction, even providing gasoline to fuel the flames. National Guard troops were eventually deployed, but their orders were to contain the situation, not protect the innocent. The massacre lasted for 18 hours, leaving over 1,000 buildings in ruins and an estimated 300 people dead or missing. The exact number of fatalities is still disputed today, with some estimates ranging as high as 2,000. Thousands more were left homeless, forced to flee their burning city without access to basic necessities like food, water, or shelter. As the smoke cleared, a stark reality became apparent. The destruction of Greenwood was not just an act of violence against its residents, but also an economic and psychological blow from which the community would. The once thriving business district lay in ruins, its properties seized by white developers who rebuilt on top of the rubble. The aftermath of the massacre saw a collective effort to erase the event from history books and public memory. Mayor Harry Patel publicly apologized for the destruction, but his words were empty, as meaningful action was taken to address the root causes of the violence or compensate the victims. In fact, a subsequent grand jury report excused the actions of the white mob, labeling them excessive zeal. The silence surrounding the massacre continued for decades, even as the civil rights movement gained. It wasn't until 1997 that then Tulsa Mayor Bill Loudon officially acknowledged the city's role in the destruction and expressed his regret. But what happened next is equally significant. The failure to address the systemic issues that led to the massacre ensured its repeat. Just 20 years after Greenwood, the city was hit by another major racial disturbance. This time, a police beating of a Black teenager sparked the 1967 riot. The pattern would continue, with Tulsa's Black community facing disproportionate policing and socio-economic hardship. The long-term consequences are still felt today in Oklahoma's African-American community. Systemic racism persists, with stark disparities in education, healthcare, and economic opportunities between whites and blacks. In fact, a recent study found that Tulsa County has one of the highest rates of police brutality against black people in the country. Despite these ongoing challenges, the story of Greenwood has not been forgotten by all. A growing number of activists and historians are working tirelessly to preserve the memory of this remarkable community and its tragic demise. In 2018, the city finally acknowledged the massacre as a racial terror attack, paving the way for reparations and restitution efforts. One such effort is the Black Wall Street Legacy Festival, an annual celebration held in Greenwood that honors the district's rich history and resilience. Organized by local activists, the festival brings together artists, performers, and community leaders to celebrate the tragedy while promoting unity and progress. Why does this story still matter today? As our world grapple with racial tensions and systematic inequality, the tale of Tulsa serves as a searing reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked racism. It highlights the imperative need for honest reckoning, accountability, and meaningful action to dismantle the systems that perpetuate oppression. In an era where fake news and historical revisionism threaten our understanding of reality, it's crucial we confront the uncomfortable truths of our collective past. By doing so, we can learn from the lessons of history and work towards a future where such atrocities will not recur. Tulsa's forgotten massacre serves as a stark warning. Without vigilant attention to these issues, they risk being swept under the rug once again. But even in darkness lies hope, for it is through remembering our darkest moments that we can move closer to a more just and equitable society. As we delve deeper into the history of Greenwood, it's essential to understand the context surrounding the massacre.
On June 1st, 1921, Tulsa was on the cusp of a racial powder keg, fueled by long-standing tensions between African Americans and whites.
Despite being one of the wealthiest black communities in the country, Greenwood was also one of the most segregated. The city's white elite had long enforced a strict apartheid system, limiting black access to education, employment, and even basic services. In the years leading up to the massacre, tension simmered just below the surface. African Americans began to push back against these oppressive systems, establishing their own businesses, schools, and community organizations in Greenwood. They built thriving institutions, restaurants, hotels, and movie theaters that catered specifically to black patrons. This economic growth sparked a sense of pride and self-sufficiency among the community, with many residents proudly referring to Greenwood as Black Wall Street. However, this burgeoning success also drew the ire of In 1920, a white-owned newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune, published inflammatory articles demonizing African American progress in Greenwood. These racist editorials claimed that black residents were becoming too prosperous and were therefore a threat to white supremacy. As tensions escalated, a series of incidents sparked by white mobs against African Americans began to occur throughout the city. On May 30, 1921, an argument between a young black man and a white girl at a movie theater in downtown Tulsa quickly turned violent. The incident was seized upon by local leaders as an excuse for a full-blown assault on Greenwood. A white mob, estimated to be several hundred strong, descended upon the community under the guise of restoring order. But in reality, they set out to terrorize and destroy everything that stood in their way: businesses, schools, and even hospitals. Over the course of 18 hours, the mob pillaged and burned Greenwood to the ground, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction. The official estimate of those killed during the massacre ranges from 39 to over 300 people. Many bodies were buried in mass graves, some never identified or claimed. Survivors recounted tales of horrors beyond comprehension: families trapped inside burning homes, children orphaned, women raped, and entire neighborhoods reduced to smoldering ruins. The massacre was eerily reminiscent of the Atlanta riot of 1906, another infamous racial atrocity in which white mobs attacked African American residents, leaving behind a legacy of terror and trauma. The events that unfolded on June 1st, 1921, would go on to become one of the most devastating racist attacks in American history. The aftermath of the massacre was marked by government and media complicity. Local authorities actively suppressed news of the attack, with many white officials downplaying or outright denying any involvement in the destruction. African Americans who tried to speak out were met with intimidation, arrest, and even violence. It wasn't until decades later that some truth about the events began to surface.
As we explore this painful chapter in American history, it's crucial to recognize the ongoing impact of the massacre on present-day Tulsa.
The wounds inflicted that fateful night continue to reverberate through generations, manifesting as trauma, anxiety, and intergenerational poverty. Local activists have taken it upon themselves to not only preserve the memory of Greenwood, but also work towards healing the deep-seated racial divisions that persist in the community. In a poignant testament to their resilience, many residents of Greenwood today proudly point out the exact location where their family home stood before they were destroyed. They speak of their ancestors with reverence and affection, highlighting stories of courage and defiance that kept their families alive during those terrible days. These oral histories serve as powerful reminders that even amidst devastation lies an unbreakable human spirit. Today, as we grapple with our collective past, it's essential to acknowledge the long-standing racial injustices that have haunted America for centuries. We must confront the systematic inequalities that continue to plague communities of color and commit ourselves to meaningful change. Only by acknowledging and learning from these darkest moments can we build a more just society, one where such atrocities will never recur. The legacy of Greenwood stands as an urgent call to action. Let us not forget, nor permit our governments or institutions to erase the memory of this devastating event. As we look towards a brighter future, it's time to ensure that our collective past informs a present built on accountability, empathy, and the shared humanity that defines us all. As we delve deeper into the story of Greenwood, it's essential to examine the historical context that led up to the massacre. On May 31st, 1921, the city of Tulsa was a hotbed of racial tension, fueled by the influx of white migrants seeking economic opportunities in the oil-rich region. African Americans had long been an integral part of the community, having established a thriving neighborhood known as Greenwood, which boasted its own schools, hospitals, and businesses. The area had become a beacon of hope for many black families who were able to build better lives for themselves and their children. However, as white migration intensified, so did tensions between the two communities. Racial animosity simmered just below the surface, with whites frequently viewing African Americans as inferior and accusing them of stealing jobs and economic opportunities. On that fateful night in 1921, a series of events sparked the violence that would unfold. A black teenager named Dick Rowland was arrested after allegedly assaulting by an elevator operator at the Drexel building. As news of the arrest spread, rumors began to circulate that Rowland had been lynched by an angry mob. The story was likely exaggerated or entirely fabricated, but it was enough to galvanize white vigilantes into action. A group of armed whites, some of whom were veterans and law enforcement officials, descended upon Greenwood, intent on exacting revenge for what they perceived as a grievance against the black community. Over the next 12 hours, they pillaged and burned homes, businesses, and even churches, leaving hundreds dead or displaced. The scale of destruction was staggering. An estimated 1,000 buildings were reduced to ashes. Eyewitness accounts from survivors paint a harrowing picture of chaos and terror. They describe how families were forced to flee their homes at gunpoint, with women and children separated from their husbands and fathers as they desperately sought safety. Those who attempted to return to their homes found them looted, vandalized, or destroyed beyond recognition. The aftermath of the massacre was marked by a concerted effort by local officials to downplay its significance. They dismissed it as a riot or a disturbance, rather than acknowledging the brutal violence that had been perpetrated against African Americans. The few who dared speak out were met with silence, ridicule, or even arrest. However, in the years following the massacre, whispers of a cover-up began to circulate among those within the black community. It wasn't until 1999, nearly 8 decades after the event, that the Oklahoma State Legislature officially acknowledged the tragedy and established a commission to investigate its causes. The Tulsa Commission's findings were both sobering and revealing. They detailed how white officials had deliberately conspired to downplay the extent of the destruction and to intimidate African American witnesses into silence. The report also highlighted the long-standing patterns of racial prejudice that had fueled the violence, including Jim Crow laws, segregation, and discriminatory economic practices. Today, as we look back on this dark chapter in American history, it's clear that the wounds inflicted on Greenwood still linger. Intergenerational trauma, poverty, and anxiety continue to plague communities of color, even in affluent cities like Tulsa. However, there is hope, a growing recognition among local leaders and residents that together they can build a more equitable future. In 2018, the city of Tulsa finally acknowledged its role in perpetuating racial injustice by paying reparations to surviving victims' families. The gesture marked a long overdue acknowledgement of past wrongs and a commitment to confronting systemic racism head-on. As we continue this journey into America's painful history, it becomes increasingly clear that our collective past is not simply a series of discrete events, but a continuum of actions and attitude. It's time for us to confront these darker moments, not as relics of a bygone era, but as a living testament to the resilience of human spirit. A reminder that even amidst devastation lies an unwavering commitment to justice. June 1st, 1921. A sweltering summer evening in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The city's African American community, known as the Greenwood District, was abuzz with excitement. Businesses were thriving, and residents were proud of their vibrant neighborhood, dubbed the Black Wall Street. But little did they know, a storm was brewing on the horizon. For decades, tensions had been simmering between white Tulsans and their African American neighbors. Racial segregation, economic inequality, and the influx of migrant workers during World War I had created a powder keg of resentment. On this fateful evening, a spark would ignite a conflagration that would reduce Greenwood to ashes. The trigger for the tragedy was a series of incidents involving Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old African-American shoe shiner, and Sarah Page, a 7-year-old white elevator operator. According to eyewitness accounts, on May 31st, Rowland entered the Drexel building, where Page worked, to use the restroom. An altercation ensued when Page allegedly accused him of attempting to assault her. The police were called, and Rowland was arrested. The arrest would have been a minor incident in any other city, but in Tulsa, it became a catalyst for violence. A white mob began to gather outside the jail, demanding that Rowland be handed over to them. Mayor Harry Patton refused, citing the need for due process. But the crowd grew increasingly agitated. Around 10 p.m., a group of armed men, allegedly led by local businessman and Ku Klux Klan member William Simons, stormed the police station. They dragged Dick Rowland from his cell and took him to the courthouse. The next morning, June 1st, a grand jury was hastily convened and charges against Rowland were dropped. However, the damage had been done. A mob of around 2,000 whites, many of whom were armed and wore masks, descended upon Greenwood, intent on terrorizing its residents. Windows were smashed, businesses looted, and homes set ablaze. The once thriving community was reduced to rubble within hours. Eyewitness accounts describe the scene as apocalyptic. William Banks, a survivor who lost his family in the massacre, recalled, "It looked like the end of the world. Flames everywhere, smoke filling the air, people running for their lives." The official death toll would later be recorded at 39, but estimates range from 75 to over 300. Thousands more were left homeless and destitute. The destruction was so comprehensive that it took weeks for cleanup efforts to begin. As news of the tragedy spread, a peculiar phenomenon occurred. Major media outlets, including the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune, reported on the event, but with striking omissions. They described the violence as rioting or looting, downplaying the racial dynamics at play. This selective reporting has contributed to Greenwood's tragic legacy being all but forgotten. The 1921 Tulsa Massacre was not an isolated incident. Rather, it was a manifestation of a systemic racism that had been simmering for decades in the United States. The horrors committed that night were merely a symptom of a far larger disease. John Hope Franklin, a renowned historian and expert on the massacre, noted, "The destruction of Greenwood was more than just an event. It was a symbol of America's failure to live up to its promise." In the years following the massacre, the city government and business leaders collaborated to erase all records of the tragedy from public memory. Survivors were intimidated into silence, and their stories were buried alongside the rubble. The 1921 Tulsa Massacre remains one of the most underreported atrocities in American history. Yet, its impact on modern-day society cannot be overstated. It highlights the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality in the United States. One individual who has dedicated his life to uncovering the truth about Greenwood is Eddie Faye Gates. A resident of Tulsa since 1966, Gates had always heard whispers of secret in her community's past. After years of research and interview survivors' descendants, she created an exhibit at the Gilcrease Museum, which now stands as one of the most important repositories of information on the massacre. Gates recalled, "I wanted to ensure that people knew what really happened here, that this wasn't just some minor incident in American history. But even today, Tulsa's response to the tragedy remains contentious." In 1999, the Oklahoma State Legislature passed a resolution acknowledging the massacre and apologizing for it. However, critics argue that this gesture fell short of true accountability. The legacy of Greenwood continues to resonate with contemporary America. The city's ongoing struggle with racial tension and economic inequality serve as a reminder that the wounds of 1921 still linger. As historian David Blight noted, "We can't ignore the fact that Tulsa is not alone in its complicity with white supremacy. We must confront our shared responsibility for the past." In recent years, grassroots efforts have to preserve the memory of Greenwood. Local organizations have worked tirelessly to restore homes, businesses, and historic landmarks. As part of this process, a poignant monument was erected at the site where Dick Rowland's house once stood. The memorial reads, "Here on Greenwood Avenue stood a thriving black community destroyed by violence and terror in 1921. This somber reminder serves as a testament to the indomitable spirit of the people who called Greenwood home. Despite the brutal suppression of their hopes and dreams, they refused to be silenced." In the end, the story of the forgotten massacre of Tulsa, Oklahoma, stands as a haunting epitaph to America's unfulfilled promise. A cautionary tale that serves as a reminder we must confront our darkest histories if we are to heal and move forward. As we close this chat on American history, let us remember the words of William Banks, who lost his family in the massacre. "I never thought I'd see the day when people would care, but now I think they might." As the years passed, the story of Greenwood and its tragic fate continued to unfold. In 2018, a new exhibit opened at the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, dedicated to the history of the massacre. The exhibit, titled Greenwood, a Self-Made Nation, brought to life the vibrant community that once thrived on Greenwood Avenue. Through artifacts, photographs, and personal stories. The exhibit humanized the victims of the massacre and highlighted the resilience of its survivors. One such survivor was Viola Fletcher, who lived through the massacre as a child. Now, in her 108th year, Fletcher has become an integral part of the ongoing efforts to preserve the memory of Greenwood. She has shared her story with countless people, speaking at events and meetings to raise awareness about the tragedy. "It's like it never happened," Fletcher said in an interview. "People don't remember what took place here. They don't know that a whole community was destroyed." Fletcher's words struck with many, including Tulsa Mayor G.T. In 2019, Bynum announced plans to establish the Greenwood Rising Museum, a $20 million facility dedicated to preserving the history of the massacre and its aftermath. "It's about truth-telling," Bynum said in a statement. "It's about acknowledging what happened and using that as an opportunity for healing and growth." The museum, which is set to open in 2023, will feature interactive exhibits, personal stories, and it will also serve as a hub for community events and educational programs. While the Greenwood Rising Museum represents a major step forward in preserving the memory of the massacre, some critics argue that more needs to be done to address the ongoing legacy of racial tension and economic inequality in Tulsa. As historian David Blight noted earlier, we can't just commemorate the past, we have to confront its ongoing impact. To this end, local organizations have been working tirelessly to address these issues. The Greenwood Cultural Center, a community-driven initiative, has established programs aimed at promoting economic development and social justice in the area. "We're not just preserving history," said the center's executive director, Angela Walton Raji. "We're creating a better future for our community." As the story of Greenwood continues to unfold, it serves as a poignant reminder of America's unfulfilled. The massacre of 1921 was a stark illustration of white supremacy in action, and its legacy remains with us today. In an effort to move forward, local residents have been working towards reconciliation and healing. Community members have come together to share their stories, support each other, and create a more inclusive and equitable society. "It's not just about the past," said Viola Fletcher, reflecting on her experiences. "It's about what we do now to ensure that something like this never happens again." The story of Greenwood stands as a testament to human resilience in the face of unimaginable tragedy. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for redemption and healing. As historian David Blight concluded, "We must confront our shared responsibility for the past. We must own up to the harm we've caused and work towards creating a more just society." As the years went by, the legacy of the Greenwood Massacre continued to shape the city of Tulsa in profound ways. The massacre had left deep emotional scars on the community, but it also sparked a sense of determination among its survivors. Many began to rebuild their lives, opening new businesses and revitalizing the area. One such individual was Clara Luper, a young African-American woman who grew up in Greenwood during the 1920s. Clara's family had lost everything in the massacre, but she refused to let it define her. Instead, she channeled her energy into activism, becoming a leading figure in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Clara was a fierce advocate for racial equality, using nonviolent resistance to challenge segregation and bring attention to the long-standing injustices faced by African Americans in Tulsa. Her activism caught the attention of Martin Luther King Jr., who would later cite her as an inspiration for his own work. Despite tireless efforts, many challenges remained. The massacre had not only destroyed lives, but also left a lasting impact on the city's economic and social structure.
For decades, African Americans in Tulsa faced institutionalized racism, including discriminatory housing policies and voting restrictions.
It wasn't until 1999 that the Oklahoma State Legislature officially acknowledged the Greenwood Massacre as a domestic terrorism event, with the governor issuing an apology for the state's role in the tragedy. This historic recognition marked a crucial step towards acknowledging the past and working towards reconciliation.
However, many residents felt that more needed to be done to address the ongoing legacy of racial tension and economic inequality in Tulsa.
As Angela Walton-Raji noted earlier, preserving history is not enough. It's about creating a better future for the community. In recent years, local organizations have made significant strides in promoting economic development and social justice in Greenwood. The Greenwood Cultural Center has launched initiatives aimed at supporting small businesses and providing resources to community members. Other organizations have focused on education and awareness efforts, working to ensure that the story of Greenwood is not forgotten. One such effort is the Remembering Greenwood campaign, a public art project that seeks to highlight the history and cultural significance of the area.
The initiative features murals, sculptures,
and other installations throughout the neighborhood, serving as a visual reminder of the community's rich heritage and resilience. As I walked through the streets of Greenwood, I noticed something remarkable. Amidst the scars of the past, there is a palpable sense of hope and renewal. Residents are coming together to share their stories, rebuild their lives, and create a more inclusive society. In the midst of this revitalization, the Greenwood Rising Museum stands as a testament to the power of memory and commemoration. While it serves as a poignant reminder of America's unfulfilled promise, it also inspires us to confront our shared responsibility for the past and work towards creating a more just society. As Clara Luper once said, we must face the darkness of our past in order to find the light of hope for our future. The story of Greenwood serves as a powerful reminder that amidst unimaginable tragedy, there is, as we conclude our exploration of the forgotten massacre that ravaged Tulsa's Greenwood district, one cannot help but be struck by the magnitude of what transpired on that fateful night, June 1st, 1921. A community that had been the envy of America boast the highest per capita income of any African American city in the country, was reduced to ashes and rubble. The events of that day were a culmination of years of simmering tensions between black and white residents, exacerbated by the arrival of hundreds of armed vigilantes from surrounding towns. The National Guard, deployed to quell the violence, instead stood idly by as homes, businesses, and lives were destroyed. The death toll is estimated to be anywhere from 60 to over 300, with countless more injured. The destruction was not limited to physical property. It was a crushing blow to the very fabric of community. Torn apart, livelihoods lost, and a sense of security shattered. The memories of that night still haunt the descendants of those who lived through it, their stories passed down through generations as a testament to the resilience of a people. We've seen the of the victims, the perpetrators, and the bystanders. We've heard their voices, though some have long since been silenced by time. We've walked through the streets of Greenwood, once bustling with activity, now eerily quiet. The remnants of what was once the Black Wall Street serve as a poignant reminder of what can happen when fear, prejudice, and violence are allowed to take hold. As we reflect on this tragic event, it's essential to acknowledge that Tulsa is not an isolated incident in American history. Rather, it represents a darker chapter in our nation's narrative, one that speaks to the systematic inequalities and racial biases that persist to this day. The question lingers: how can we ensure that such atrocities never again befall any community, regardless of its background or socioeconomic status? Can we find common ground to confront and reconcile with our shared history? Or will we continue to sweep it under the rug, leaving the wounds of the past to fester? As we delve deeper into the events leading up to that fateful night, it becomes clear that the seeds of destruction were sown long before June 1st, 1921.
For decades, Tulsa's African American community had been growing in prosperity and population, driven by an influx of migrants from the rural South seeking better economic opportunities.
Greenwood, as it came to be known, was a beacon of self-determination for Black Americans, with its own business district, schools, hospitals, and cultural institutions. But this growth and success also sparked resentment among white Tulsans, who saw their own social and economic status threatened by the rising tide of Black progress. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, fueled by discriminatory practices like redlining, Jim Crow laws, and racial violence. The Tulsa Tribune, a prominent local newspaper at the time, frequently published inflammatory articles and cartoons that stoked white anger towards Black residents. One such incident that set off the chain reaction of events leading up to the massacre was the alleged arrest of Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old African-American shoe shiner, on May 30th, 1921. Accused of assaulting a white elevator operator, Sarah Page, Rowland's arrest sparked protests and riots as rumors spread like wildfire through the city. As the chaos escalated, hundreds of armed white vigilantes from surrounding towns, many of whom were deputized by local officials, descended upon Greenwood with a singular purpose: to clean up the Black community. The National Guard, deployed to quell the violence, instead stood idly by, allowing the destruction to unfold. Eyewitness accounts described the scene as one of utter chaos and carnage. Homes were dynamited, prisoners looted and burned to the ground, and people hunted down in the streets. Women and children cowered in fear as their families were torn apart. The sounds of gunfire, screams, and crashing debris filled the air. As the night wore on, the city's infrastructure began to collapse. Power lines were cut, water mains broken, and telegraph lines severed. The once thriving community was reduced to a state of martial law, with soldiers patrolling the streets and curfews imposed. The full extent of the destruction can be grasped by visiting the Greenwood Cultural Center today, where a comprehensive exhibit showcases the history of the massacre and its aftermath. Visitors are struck by the sheer scale of devastation. Photographs of ruined buildings, shattered glass, and upended furniture serve as haunting reminders of what was lost. But it's not just the physical destruction that still resonates with survivors' families. It's also the emotional toll of losing everything they had worked for. Descendants of those who lived through the massacre continue to bear the scars of trauma, past stories of loss and resilience from generation to generation. I remember hearing about my great-grandfather's house being destroyed, says Angela Walton Raji, a Tulsa native whose family was directly affected by the massacre. He lost everything: his home, his business, his livelihood. It was like our community was erased overnight. For decades, the truth of what transpired in Greenwood on June 1st, 1921, was deliberately hidden from view, with city officials and politicians denying or... But as Walton Raji and other activists began to push for recognition and accountability, a new narrative emerged, one that acknowledges the deep-seated racism and systematic inequalities that fuel tragedy. The struggle for truth and justice is ongoing in Tulsa, with many still seeking reparations and official apologies for the destruction of their community. As we reflect on this painful chapter in American history, we are reminded that the wounds of the past can never be fully healed without confronting the darker aspects of our collective identity. The question remains, how will we ensure that such atrocities never again occur? And what steps can we take to build a more equitable society for all? The massacre in Greenwood was not an isolated incident, but rather one symptom of a broader pattern of racial violence and terrorism that plagued the United States during the early 20th century. The Ku Klux Klan, which had been reactivated in Tulsa in the late 1910s, played a significant role in inciting hatred against African Americans and orchestrating the attacks on Greenwood. But while the KKK was certainly a major contributor to the violence, it was not the only perpetrator. The city of Tulsa itself bore much responsibility for allowing the massacre to unfold. At the time, the city's leadership was overwhelmingly white, with few African American officials or police officers in positions of power. As tensions between whites and blacks escalated, law enforcement agencies in Tulsa demonstrated a disturbing lack of accountability, often turning a blind eye to the violence perpetrated by white vigilantes. One notable example is that of Sheriff Willard McCullough, who openly advocated for the use of force against African American residents and even helped to orchestrate a campaign of intimidation and harassment aimed. When questioned about his role in the events leading up to the massacre, McCullough later claimed that he had been surprised by the violence, despite having issued clear warnings that African Americans would be targeted if they did. The destruction of Greenwood on June 1, 1921, was a catastrophe that went far beyond mere property damage. It marked the end of a vibrant community that had thrived in Tulsa for generations. Once one of the wealthiest and most culturally rich black communities in the country, Greenwood was a place where African Americans could live, work, and socialize freely, free from the constraints of segregation and racism. The massacre erased all that. Hundreds of homes and businesses were reduced to rubble, including many iconic establishments, like the Dreamland Theatre, which had hosted countless performances by renowned black artists. The once thriving commercial district was left in ruins, with African American-owned stores, restaurants, and hotels destroyed or abandoned. Many residents were forced to flee their homes without access to basic necessities, leaving them destitute and vulnerable. The aftermath of the massacre saw little in the way of accountability or justice for those responsible. While a handful of white men were eventually charged with crimes related to the violence, none faced serious consequences for their actions. The Tulsa Tribune, the city's largest newspaper at the time, played down the severity of the attacks and blamed African Americans for inciting the violence. In the decades that followed, Tulsa's African American community struggled to rebuild and recover from the trauma inflicted upon them. Many residents were forced to leave the city altogether, fleeing to other parts of the country in search of safety and opportunity. Those who remained faced ongoing racism and segregation, which continue to deny them access to basic rights like education, employment, and healthcare. It is only relatively recently that the truth about the massacre has begun to emerge.
Thanks to tireless advocacy by survivors' families and community leaders, the city of Tulsa has finally acknowledged its role in the destruction of Greenwood and has taken steps towards reconciliation and redress.
In 2020, Mayor G.T. Bynum issued a formal apology for the city's complicity in the massacre, acknowledging that the city of Tulsa failed to protect its citizens and promising to work towards greater equity and justice. But much remains to be done. Survivors' families continue to push for reparations and official recognition of their ancestors' sacrifices, as well as meaningful steps towards reconciliation and healing. As we look back on this painful chapter in American history, it is clear that the wounds of the past cannot be fully healed without confronting the darker aspects of our collective identity and working towards a more just and in the words of Angela Walton Raji, whose great-grandfather lost everything in the massacre. This event was not just about destruction, it's also about what we're trying to rebuild. We're still trying to find justice and recognition. We're not just talking about rebuilding buildings, we're talking about rebuilding lives. We're talking about rebuilding lives. As Angela Walton Raji's words echo through the ages, they serve as a poignant reminder of the massacre of 1921 was not merely an isolated incident, but a symptom of a broader disease that had taken hold of America's psyche, a disease of racism, xenophobia, and white supremacy. The Green Book, a travel guide published by Victor Hugo Green in the 1930s, listed Tulsa as one of the cities where African Americans could expect to find safety and welcome. However, beneath this facade of acceptance lay a complex web of segregation, Jim Crow laws, and racial terror that rendered Greenwood vulnerable to attack. As the years passed, the memories of the massacre were slowly erased from public consciousness, lost in the misty annals of time. The city's leaders made no effort to memorialize or acknowledge the tragedy, choosing instead to sweep it under the rug as a dark chapter best forgotten. But for those who had lived through it, the survivors and their descendants, the wounds never fully healed. The 1990s saw a resurgence in interest in the Tulsa Massacre, with the publication of Scott Ellsworth's book, Death in a Promised Land, and the Create Oklahoma Commission to study the 1921 Tulsa riot. This renewed focus on the event sparked a wave of activism among local residents, who began to push for greater recognition and reparations. One such advocate was Hannibal B. Johnson, a lawyer and historian who had spent years researching the massacre. In 2000, he co-authored Black Wall Street: From Riots to Redress in Black Tulsa, a book that detailed the history of Greenwood's rise and fall. Johnson also played a key role in helping survivors' families navigate the complex process of seeking reparations from the city. The push for reparations gained momentum in 2016, when the Oklahoma State Legislature passed a bill authorizing the creation of the Reconciliation Fund, which would provide compensation to descendants of those affected by the massacre. However, many advocates felt that this was merely a token gesture, as the fund's funding mechanism was tied to the city's budget, and thus subject to fluctuations in revenue. As tensions between advocates and local officials simmered, Angela Walton-Raji continued her tireless efforts to raise awareness about the massacre and its aftermath. Her advocacy work took her across the country, from universities and museums to congressional hearings and community forums. With each step forward, she pushed against the lingering stench of racism and denial that clung to Greenwood like a shroud. "I've spent years doing this," Walton-Raji once said in an interview, "and I've seen people get tired or think it's not worth it. But for me, it's about justice, not just monetary reparations, but also the acknowledgement of what happened. We want to be able to say, yes, we remember. We want our history to be acknowledged." Today, as the city of Tulsa continues its halting efforts towards reconciliation and redress, Walton-Raji remains at the forefront